Hello, today I'm looking at Majjhima Nikaya number 66, which is the Latukikopama Sutta, the Latukikopama Sutta, and that's translated as the simile of the quail. Now it's quite long, but the theme of the sutta, and it covers quite a lot of different examples, is talking about, the way I understand it, the ties or possessions or fetters that bind us, and whether they are real or imagined, either way they are detrimental to the path of enlightenment. So this sort of takes place in the town of Apana, in the country of the Anguttaraparans. And the personnel, there's Buddha is involved, the Venerable Udayin, who's a monk or bhikkhu, a follower of Buddha. So the sutta opens with Buddha going into Apana on his alms round, then settling in a grove for the day's abiding. Similarly, the Venerable Udayin went to Apana on alms round, similarly settled in a grove for the day's abiding. And whilst meditating, Udayan wondered how many painful states had the Blessed One rid us of. How many pleasant states has the Blessed One brought us? How many unwholesome states? How many wholesome states? So that evening, Udayin went to Buddha and related his thoughts to Buddha. In particular, the occasion when the Buddha told his followers not to eat outside the proper time, and how, to Udayin, that it seemed such a waste because householders gave them food throughout the day. And then the Blessed One told his followers to abandon the evening meal, which is now outside the proper time. And again Udayin related how upset he was, having put aside food collected during the day to eat with his fellow monks in the evenings, that nearly all dishes were prepared at night, little by day. Yet, Udayin continued, out of love and respect for the Blessed One, out of shame and fear of wrongdoing, we abandoned that night meal, which was outside the proper time. Udayin exemplifies this. When wandering for alms at night, bhikkhus have walked into cesspools, thorn bushes, have met hoodlums, been enticed by women, been reprimanded for scaring people in the night. Venerable Sir, when I remembered this, I thought, how many painful states has the Blessed One rid us of? How many pleasant states has the Blessed One brought us? Buddha replies, and yet there are certain men who, when told by me to abandon some practices, that what I am asking is a small thing, that I am much too exacting. So Buddha saying it's a small thing he's asking for, but it seemed to be a big thing by some of his followers. Thus they do not abandon this thing, and for them it becomes a bone of contention, a strong, stout, taut, tough, unrotting tether, and a thick yoke. Suppose, Buddha says to Udayin, a quail, a small bird, was tethered by a rotting creeper, and so would expect injury, captivity, and death. Now, suppose a passer-by observes that the tether is weak and rotting, and is not capable of restraining the quail. Would the passer-by be speaking the truth? No, replies Udayin. For that quail, the rotting creeping by which she is tethered, and thereby expects injury, captivity, or death, for that quail, the creeper is strong, stout, tough, unrotting, and a thick yoke. So too, Buddha continues, for certain men who are told abandon this practice, and who do not abandon the practice, they show discourtesy to me as well as the bhikkhus who are desirous of training. For those certain men, that practice becomes a strong, stout, tough, unrotting tether and a thick yoke. Yet there are others who will abandon the practice as requested by me. They do not show discourtesy, and having abandoned the practice, they live at ease, unruffled, subsisting on others' gifts, with a mind as free as a wild deer. For them, that request becomes a feeble, rotting tether. Now, suppose, Udayin, a magnificent royal elephant, accustomed to battle, with tethered by stout leather thongs, but by simply twisting those thongs he could be free. Now suppose someone said that the leather thongs are for the elephant a strong, stout, tough, unrotting tether. Would this person be speaking rightly? No, replies Udayin. To the elephant, those tethers, those thongs, are feeble, weak, and rotten. So too, Udayin, Buddha says, there are certain clansmen who, when told by me, abandon this, then abandon it, do not show me discourtesy or show discourtesy to the bhikkhu's desires of training. Having abandoned it, they live at ease, unruffled, subsisting on others' gifts with minds as free as wild deer. The next simile Buddha refers to in the same vein is the poor destitute man who lives in a dilapidated hovel with a dilapidated bed, a dilapidated wife, and a few grains of food. This man sees a bhikkhu relaxing in a park, feet freshly washed, having eaten a delicious meal and devoting himself to developing a higher mind. The destitute man is envious of the monk and thinks to himself, if only he too could shave off his hair and beard, put on the yellow robe and go forth into homelessness. But the destitute man is unable to abandon his hovel, his dilapidated bed, his dilapidated wife, or his meagre grains of food. So, Buddha poses the question to Udayin. Suppose someone said, the tethers by which this destitute man are feeble, weak, rotting tethers. Would he be speaking rightly? No, replies Udayin. For the destitute man, those tethers are strong, stout, tough, unrotting, and a thick yoke. So too, Buddha makes the point. There are certain misguided men who, when told by me, abandon this, then do not abandon this, and they show discourtesy towards me, as well as towards the bhikkhu's desires of training. The last simile that Buddha refers to is one of a rich man with vast wealth and property, gold ingots, granaries, slaves, wives. He might see a bhikkhu sitting in a forest park and think how pleasant is the recluse's state. If only I could shave off my hair and beard, put on the yellow robe, and go forth from the home life to the homeless life. Being able to abandon the vast wealth and property, gold ingots, granaries, slaves, wives. Now, says Buddha, suppose someone says, the tether by which that household is tethered is strong, so he cannot abandon his gold ingots, granaries, slaves, wives, and become a recluse. For him they are strong, tough, unrotting tether and a thick yoke. Would the observer be speaking rightly? No, replies Udayin. The tethers by which the household is tethered, so that he can abandon his vast number of gold ingots, granaries, slaves, wives, and become a recluse, for him they are feeble, weak, rotting, cawless tether. So Buddha's given 4 examples. The first, the quail, held by weak bonds, but appears strong to the captive. The poor man, held by weak bonds, but appears strong to the captive. The bull elephant, held by strong bonds, but they are in fact weak. And the rich man, held by strong bonds apparently, but they are in fact weak. Udayin, Buddha says, there are 4 kinds of persons existing in the world. 1. The person who practices the way to the abandoning of acquisitions, but memories and intentions associated with his acquisitions beset him. He tolerates them, does not cast them aside or annihilate them. Such a person I call fettered, not unfettered. 2. There is the person who practices the way to the abandoning of acquisitions, memories and intentions associated with acquisitions beset him. But he does not tolerate them. He abandons them, annihilates them. Such a person too I also call fettered, not unfettered. 3. There is a person who practices the way to the abandoning of acquisitions. When he is practicing the way, memories of intentions associated with acquisitions beset him now and then through lapses of mindfulness. His arising of mindfulness may be slow, but he quickly abandons the distractions, removes them, annihilates them. Just as if a man let 2 or 3 drops of water drop onto a heated iron plate. The falling of the water drops might be slow, but they would quickly vaporize and vanish. This person I call fettered, not unfettered. 4. Here, Udayin, some person having understood that acquisition is the root of suffering, divests himself of the acquisitions, and is liberated in the destruction of the acquisitions. Such a person I call unfettered, not fettered. So in summary, excuse me, a person retains his acquisition, practices how to abandon them, but gives in to the memory of those acquisitions, he's fettered. A person retains his acquisitions, practices how to abandon them, does not give in to the memory of them, but he is still fettered. A person retains his acquisitions, practices how to abandon them, but in moments of weakness remembers them. Even though he quickly abandons the memory, he too is fettered. And a person gets rid of his acquisitions completely, and he is unfettered. Now, the sutta continues with Buddha telling Udayin that there are 5 causes of sense pleasures. The first is forms recognized by sight, that are wished for, desired, agreeable, likable, connected with sense desire, and arousing wanting. The second is similarly sounds recognized by the ear, aromas recognized by the nose, flavors recognized by the tongue, and tactile sensation recognized by the body. They are wished for, desired, agreeable, likable, connected with sense desires, and arouse wanting. Now, any pleasure or happiness that arises due to those 5 causes of sense pleasures should be seen as a filthy pleasure, an ignoble pleasure, a run-of-the-mill pleasure. And these are not to be cultivated, developed, pursued. They are to be feared. Now, continues Buddha, there is a monk quite withdrawn from sensuality, withdrawn from unskillful mental qualities, enters and remains in the first jhana, with rapture and pleasure born from withdrawal, accompanied by direct thought and evaluation. With the stilling of directed thought and evaluation, he enters and remains in the second jhana. Rapture and pleasure born of concentration, unification of awareness, free from directed thought and evaluation, internal assurance. With the fading of rapture, he remains equanimous, calm, that is, mindful and alert, and sense pleasures with the body, and senses pleasures with the body. He enters and remains in the fourth jhana, purity of equanimity and mindfulness, neither pleasure nor pain. This is called renunciation pleasure, seclusion pleasure, calm pleasure, self-awakening pleasure. And it is of this pleasure that I say is to be cultivated, to be developed, to be pursued, that is not to be feared. Now, there's also the case where a monk quite withdrawn from sensuality and unskillful mental qualities enters and remains in the first jhana. Rapture and pleasure born from withdrawal, accompanied by directed thought and evaluation. That, I say, comes with confusion and unsteadiness. And what is confused and unsteady? the directed thoughts and evaluations that have not ceased. This is what is confused here. Now, with the stilling of directed thought and evaluations, so overcome that part, he enters upon the second jhana, rapture and pleasure, born of concentration, unification of awareness, free from directed thought and evaluation, internal assurance. This, I tell you, still comes with confusion and unsteadiness. Why? Because the rapture and pleasure has not ceased. Now, with the fading away of rapture, the monk remains equanimous, mindful and alert, and senses pleasure with the body. He enters the third jhana, of which the noble ones declare, equanimous and mindful, he has a pleasant abiding. But this is still confused and unsteady. Why? Because the equanimity pleasure has not ceased. Now, with the abandoning of pleasure and pain, he enters upon the fourth jhana. With purity of equanimity and mindfulness, neither pleasure nor pain, now that I tell, comes under the imperturbable calmness, cool-headed, unconfused. Here Udayin, quite secluded from scent pleasures, secluded from unwholesome states, a monk enters upon and abides in the first jhana. That, I say, is not enough. Abandon it, surmount it. And what surmounts it? With the stilling of applied and sustained thought, a monk enters upon and abides in the second jhana. That is what surmounts it. But that is not enough. Abandon it, surmount it. And what surmounts it? Here Udayin, with the fading away as well as rapture, a monk enters upon and abides in the third jhana. This is what surmounts it. But that too is not enough. Abandon it, surmount it. And what surmounts it? Here Udayin, with the abandoning of pleasure and pain, a monk enters upon and abides in the fourth jhana. That is what surmounts it. But that too is not enough. Abandon it, surmount it. And what surmounts it? Here Udayin, with the complete surmounting of perception of form, with the disappearance of perception of sensory input, with non-attention to perceptions of diversity, aware that space is infinite, a monk enters upon and abides in the base of infinite space. That surmounts it. Here Udayin, by completely surmounting the base of infinite space, aware that consciousness is infinite, a bhikkhu enters upon and abides in the base of infinite consciousness. That is what surmounts it. But that too is not enough. Abandon it, I say. Surmount it, I say. And what surmounts it? Here Udayin, by completely surmounting the base of infinite consciousness, aware that there is nothing, a monk enters upon, abides in the base of nothingness. That is what surmounts it. But that too is not enough. Abandon it. Surmount it, I say. And what surmounts it? Here Udayin, by completely surmounting the base of nothingness, a monk enters upon and abides in the base of neither perception nor non-perception. That is what surmounts it. But that too is not enough. Abandon it, surmount it, I say. And what surmounts it? Here Udayin, by completely surmounting the base of neither perception nor non-perception, a monk enters upon and abides in the cessation of perception and feeling. This is what surmounts it. So I speak of the abandoning even of the base of neither perception nor non-perception. And do you, Udayin, see any fetter, small or great, of where abandoning I have not spoken? No, replies Udayin. This is what the Blessed One said. The Venerable Udayin was satisfied and delighted by the Blessed One's words. And that's the end of Majjhima Nikaya number 66, the simile of the quail. So again, although it's quite a long sutta, the theme would appear to be that the possessions, fetters, ties, wherever they occur, whether they're real or imagined, that they are all detrimental to the path of enlightenment and should be abandoned. Thanks for watching.